This week on Jerusalem Dateline, violence ramps up during the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan, threatening to destabilize Prime Minister Bennett's coalition government. And Christians help fleeing Ukrainians on both sides of the border. Plus, for the first time, Israel appoints an envoy to combat anti-Semitism. And CBN's First Lady, Dee Dee Robertson, goes home to be with the Lord. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Violence during the Muslim month of Ramadan shows no signs of abating. Rocket fire from Gaza and clashes in Jerusalem ramped up during Israel's Passover holiday. And this time, there's an added friction. The trouble is threatening to topple Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's coalition government. Israel's Iron Dome defense system knocked down the missile, and the military retaliated by taking out a Hamas weapons manufacturing site. While no group claimed responsibility for the rocket attack, Israel holds Hamas responsible for what happens inside Gaza. The confrontation follows weeks of terror attacks inside Israel that's left 14 dead, dozens wounded, and days of rioting on the Temple Mount. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett accused Hamas of inciting the violence.
There are those who are encouraging rock throwing and the use of violence against the citizens of the State of Israel. This is a reward for the inciters, especially Hamas, which are trying to ignite violence in Jerusalem.
Itamar Marcus of the Palestinian Media Watch told CBN News back in February, PA leaders called for popular resistance.
Now, what does that mean? That means that all the PLO leadership, all the PA leadership are calling for violence of individuals with knives, with guns, and especially focused on the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this is coming from the top.
Marcus says Palestinian Authority leaders, like the top Islamic advisor to PA President Mahmoud Abbas, have called for religious violence during Ramadan. He said Ramadan is not a month of laziness, but rather a month of activity, of effort, and of hard work. And as it also was in the life of the Prophet, a month of jihad, conquest, and victory. For the first time in decades, the Muslim month of Ramadan, the Jewish Passover, and the Christian celebration of Easter have come at the same time. During Passover, Jews have been attacked in the Old City. Palestinians have thrown rocks at buses carrying Jews to the Western Wall and stockpiled stones on the Temple Mount, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque has been the epicenter of clashes with Israeli police. On the official PA TV prayer for Ramadan, an imam declared, "Allah, liberate the Al-Aqsa Mosque from the defilement of the evil Jews."
Palestinians are a very religious people. Ramadan is the most important month of the year. When Palestinians hear this, they feel that in order to be a good Muslim, they've got to attack Israelis, supposedly in defense of the Al-Aqsa Mosques. So this is all something that's happening from the top. Palestinians wouldn't be collecting stones if they weren't being directed from their leadership to do this.
The violence, especially on the Temple Mount, also threatens Prime Minister Bennett's government. Mansour Abbas, the head of an Islamic party that's part of the government, could leave the coalition. Since the Knesset is now split 60 to 60 seats, his 4 seats would collapse the government and likely lead to new elections. Well, Jerusalem Deputy Mayor Flor Hassan Nahum told journalists there's more to the Palestinian rioting than what many are claiming.
What we see here actually is a very deliberate strategy to try and get images out into the Muslim world that will malign Israel and will make people believe, and they're doing this constantly on social media, that somehow the status quo of Temple Mount is in danger, is under threat. The feeling amongst Muslim communities around the world that the status quo is changing, that Haram al-Sharif has been taken over and Muslim worship is no longer going to be allowed, that Haram al-Sharif, Temple Mount, is going to be divided. These are the incendiary, incitement, and false fake news that are being spread at the moment through the different social networks. The most important thing for Jerusalem, for the state of Israel, is freedom of worship, which is what we sanctify here in the city.
As you can see, the threat of rocket attacks is very real for Israel, and experts are always aiming for better protection. Now Israel has successfully tested a new defensive laser system that experts say will work alongside the Iron Dome to enhance the country's border protection. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story.
It's called Magen Or in Hebrew, or light shield.
It marks the first time that a high-power Israeli-made laser system successfully intercepted various targets, constituting a breakthrough on a global scale.
The system is a joint project of the Defense Ministry and Rafael, a defense technology company.
The successful tests complete key milestones in the development of what will be the first operational high-energy laser system in the world. We have introduced cutting-edge technologies to intercept a variety of threats in complex scenarios.
We were able to intercept a variety of threats, such as mortars, rockets, and drones.
The new system will be integrated with the Iron Dome anti-rocket system, which has been effective against rockets fired across the border shared with the Gaza Strip. Last year, during Israel's 11-day war with Gaza, terror groups fired more than 3,400 rockets at Israel. More than 90% heading for populated areas were intercepted by Iron Dome, and the interceptors cost up to $100,000 each. The laser system will be more cost-effective. In addition to this ground-based system, the IDF is also developing a platform-mounted laser system to defend troops in the field, and an aerial laser system to intercept threats from the air and to defend large areas on the ground.
The success of the high-power lasers live-fire test is a significant accomplishment for the security of the people of Israel.
Brigadier General Yaniv Rotem says the tests are just the beginning of their plan to position multiple laser transmitters along Israel's borders during the next decade. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, after 42 nights in a basement, Ukrainian foster mom escaped safely with her children, thanks to help from Orphans Promise. Imagine spending 42 nights in a basement because the Russians took over your city. That was the case for Anya and her children, who were finally able to flee, thanks to help from Orphans Promise. CBN's Wendy Griffith reports from Lviv, Ukraine.
On this Wednesday night in Lviv, Anya and her 11 foster children are finally able to laugh again. After escaping Verdansk, a city west of devastated Mariupol. Verdansk was seized by Russian forces just 4 days into the war, and the family was forced to stay in a bunker below their house for 42 days.
It was hard to live there, and it was dangerous. But every day when we woke up, we were thankful to God that we are still alive and we are still able to worship Him.
Anya says whenever they needed anything or were afraid, they would pray.
We were reading Bible, we were worship, we were fasting, and that's why we had this peace with God.
The foster children, who were mostly teenagers and who had never been through war, said they weren't afraid.
I didn't worry. I was in peace and I was in the safe place, and I know that everything will be fine. God with us, and He will gonna protect us. We were praying to God, and I felt this peace in my heart, and we all became so united and as one family, and that's why I didn't feel this fear.
Thanks to some brave drivers from Orphans Promise, Anya and her children were able to escape to Lviv, where OP turned some offices into shelters.
We help to support people who are still be in other centers, to give them food, medicine, to give them psychology support. And the most important part of our job is just gospel.
The gospel.
To share good news, because all people are open to accept Jesus.
The family is now awaiting visas to go to Switzerland, where they plan to wait out the war.
I'm excited, but I'm also a little bit sad about that. I need to leave my own country, my family, my city. About the war, I'm not happy, but the possibility that I can go to different countries, I'm happy because it was my dream.
Switzerland, here we come.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News, Lviv, Ukraine.
More than 5 million Ukrainians have fled the assault on their country. Neighboring Poland has taken in more than half of those refugees, where towns along the border are opening their arms to help. Before crossing into Ukraine, CBN's Wendy Griffith filed this report from Poland.
While one neighboring country tries to take these Ukrainians' homeland by force, Poland is opening its arms to those escaping the terror.
Here in the border town of Przemyśl, many refugees are finding comfort and shelter in the local church.
Since the war began some 6 weeks ago, Pastor Czesław of the Nazareth Church has seen hundreds of refugees pass through his doors.
We weren't prepared. It's just the needs appeared. So I believe that God prepared us anyway, and we see the big need, so we respond to the needs.
Several areas, including the main sanctuary, now serve as bedrooms for displaced families, while this spacious kitchen, equipped with a cappuccino maker, provides refugees like Anya and her 12-year-old daughter a small reminder of home.
Here we have a very good condition. We have cold water, we have separate rooms, we have bedrooms. People are very nice.
Anya and her daughter left eastern Ukraine 3 weeks ago at the urging of her husband, who stayed behind to fight. They're living here until they get their visas to England.
We're in constant contact with our friends from Kharkiv, and they couldn't get out of the Kharkiv because it was constant bombing, and they were shooting even cars who were trying to leave.
Here at the Operation Blessing tent, many more come through to receive hot drinks, blankets, and enjoy a place for their children to play. If they have nowhere to go, that's where OB and Pastor Czesław work together.
Several occasions we made a phone call to this pastor, and he showed up not even 40 minutes later with his van and with his team to bring people to the church where they could spend the night. And he's very, very helpful and accommodating, and the church is turned into a refugee center, as you've seen.
OB also provides them with hygiene kits and other relief items. Anya, a Polish native working with Operation Blessing, says helping these people is what Jesus would do.
Can you imagine if Jesus crossing the border? What would you do, yeah? Would you do everything what you can to invite him, to feed him, to keep him warm, to give him clothes if he needs, and help him, yeah, and love him, yes, because he loves us so much that we should share this love with other people.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News, on the Polish-Ukrainian border.
Up next, for the first time ever, Israel appoints a special envoy to combat rising anti-Semitism and the delegitimization of Israel. With anti-Semitism and attacks against Jews on the rise worldwide, Israel has appointed a special envoy to combat the scourge. Earlier, I spoke with Israeli-American actress and outspoken Israeli advocate Noa Tishby about her new job. Noa Tishby, welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. You're the new special envoy for the State of Israel, combating anti-Semitism and the delegitimization of the State of Israel. What was your reaction when you were chosen?
So my reaction was surprise and honor. I was sitting with the Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, and he offered me this position. Obviously, Israel never had a special envoy for combating anti-Semitism and delegitimization, so I was blown away and honored, and immediately turned to him and said, "What does this mean, though?" And he goes, "Well, it's the first one. Let's make this up together to do this job." And of course, my reaction immediately was, well, you're offering me a job that I'm going to fail at, because nobody can combat and defeat anti-Semitism. It's the oldest form of hate and discrimination that is still being practiced. However, and having said that, I'm very excited to receive this position and to actually get to work.
Yeah. Do you see anti-Semitism exploding or rising around the globe?
Absolutely. There's no question. And I think everybody is well aware of it. Over 1 billion people hold anti-Semitic views around the world. 50% of college kids in America are hiding their Jewish identity, and 65% of them say that they are afraid and don't feel safe. This is something that should worry all of us. So yeah, absolutely. Anti-Semitism is on the rise yet again.
You say that anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are one and the same. Why do you say that?
Well, if you have an aversion to borders, okay, if you don't like the concept of a nation state and you would like to dismantle every single nation state in the world, then yeah, okay, you're not anti-Semitic. But if you have a particular obsession for one country and one country only, and you have a delegitimization concept towards that particular country, and you want to deny the Jewish people of their nation state and sovereignty in their ancestral land, there's a name for that, and that's anti-Semitism. So denying Israel's right to exist, denying the Jewish people sovereignty in their ancestral land is anti-Semitic, period.
Yeah. You grew up here in Israel, Noah, and now you're living in the U.S. How did both growing up here in Israel and living in the United States prepare you for this role?
What a great question. Thank you. I always say that I am 100% Israeli and 100% American. So to me, understanding both cultures in such I hope, a profound and deep way is allowing me to create this pipeline and this bridge between these two cultures. I understand the problems that Israelis have with Americans and the problems that Americans have with Israelis, and I am able to actually communicate to these two cultures in a way that I hope is effective.
And you wrote a book, Noah, I think is one of the best primers, actually, to introduce people to Israel. Is sort of the outline of what you may be planning, what you could read in this book?
Yes, and definitely in the context of explaining the justification and the moral justification, historical justification for the existence and the safety and security of the State of Israel, not as a Jewish issue and not as an Israeli issue, but as a U.S. and international national security and Western civilization security. So, yeah, you can definitely find the buds of what I'm going to be doing in this position in my book. Yeah.
In your book, you talk a lot about the relationships, your mother, your father, your grandparents. How did your family prepare you for this role?
They did, unknowingly. I obviously grew up in a very Zionist family, surrounded by people who devoted their time and passion and life to the safety and security of the State of Israel. And it's something that as a young child or a younger adult, I didn't actually notice. What I wanted to do was be in entertainment, and I did that for many, many years. But underneath it, there was always this passion and this inability to be quiet when misunderstandings or falsehoods were being spoken next to me about Israel. So it was one of those things that I think I was being prepared for it for my entire life without ever knowing this. And I'm glad this is coming to fruition right now. I hope to be of service, and I hope to be helpful for the state of Israel, the Jewish people, and the world at large, hopefully.
Coming up, a tribute. CBN's First Lady goes home to be with the Lord. Finally today, a bit of sad news for us. Dee Dee Robertson, the wife of CBN founder Pat Robertson, went to be with the Lord on April 19th. Here's a glimpse into the woman behind the man that both raised a family and helped birth a worldwide ministry.
The First Lady of CBN, Dee Dee Robertson, the wife of CBN founder Pat Robertson, died at the age of 94. She was a founding member of the boards and continued as a member of the boards of CBN, Regent University, and Operation Blessing. And she said that doing the Lord's will had been a great blessing in her life.
I have seen more than I ever dreamed I would see. I have done more than I ever dreamed I would do. And it's just been a very exciting life. And working for the Lord is an exciting thing to do. Following His leading and doing the things that He wants you to do.
Dee Dee traveled extensively for CBN. She was selected Christian Woman of the Year in 1986. She was also an accomplished writer, authoring 2 books and a monthly column for Christian Life magazine. Pat Robertson often talked about how he cherished Dee Dee's wise counsel.
She has a good Midwestern common sense view of life, and when I run something by her, she's usually pretty much right on in terms of what needs to be done or what shouldn't be done. So it's nice to have a wife you can pray with and work together with.
Pat called her a woman of great faith, a champion of the gospel, and a remarkable servant of Christ who has left an indelible print on all that she set her hand to during her extraordinary life. And CBN CEO Gordon Robertson said, "Mom was the glue that held the Robertson family together. She was always working behind the scenes. If it weren't for Mom, there wouldn't be a CBN." You can see the full tribute to Dee Dee Robertson on CBNNews.com.
Dee Dee Robertson will be missed by her family and friends and the CBN community. Please continue to pray for the family as they mourn the loss of their matriarch, but also rejoice that she is with the Lord. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.